Did medieval knights truly know a love so powerful it defied death? Were queens and scholars tangled in passionate affairs that shattered lives and kingdoms, leaving behind echoes of their despair? From the dark ages of the 12th century, these stories and the melodies they inspired still chill us to the bone. Number 5. The Lament of the Unseen Crown. In the cold granite lands of Portugal, a story unfolded in the mid-14th century. A tale of love so defiant it crowned a corpse. This is the tragic saga of Inês de Castro and Prince Pedro, a narrative carved into the very history of the House of Burgundy. It began not in a courtly embrace, but in the quiet chambers of a lady-in-waiting. Inês de Castro arrived in Portugal as part of the retinue of Constance of Castile, the bride destined for Prince Pedro, the heir apparent to the Portuguese throne. Inês was noble, beautiful, and possessed a quiet charm that, according to chronicles, like the Crónica de Dom Pedro I by Fernão Lopes, quickly captivated the young prince. Pedro, already bound by duty to Constance, found himself drawn to Inês. Their connection grew subtle at first, then undeniable. Court, a place of constant observation and whispers, soon noticed the prince's increasing devotion to Inês rather than his official consort. This was not a mere dalliance. It was a deep, consuming affection that defied the political realities of the time. Constance the Queen to be bore Pedro several children, but his heart, it was said, remained with Inês. Their love was a direct challenge to the throne, to the established order of succession, and to the very idea of dynastic marriages. The whispers escalated into outright fear among the Portuguese nobility. Inês de Castro belonged to a powerful Castilian family, and her growing influence over Pedro was seen as a grave threat. The nobles, particularly those close to King Afonso IV, Pedro's father, worried that if Inês were to bear Pedro a legitimate heir, it could lead to civil war, Castilian dominance, or even a challenge to the existing line of succession. This was a period of intense political maneuvering between kingdoms on the Iberian Peninsula, where alliances and betrayals were commonplace. The Livro de Linhagens, a medieval genealogical work, might hint at the complex web of family ties that contributed to these anxieties. King Afonso IV, a monarch known for his firmness and his dedication to the stability of his kingdom, initially tried to separate the lovers. He banished Inês from court, hoping distance would cool Pedro's ardor. Their bond, forged in secret and sustained by defiant passion, only deepened. When Constance died in 1345, the situation grew even more dire. Pedro, now a widower, refused to remarry for political convenience. Instead, he openly acknowledged Inês as his true love, and some accounts suggest even secretly married her in a private ceremony, though this was never officially recognized by the church or the state. The Crónica de Dom Pedro further details the king's increasing frustration and the escalating tension within the royal family. Inês bore Pedro 4 children, cementing her place in his eyes as his legitimate consort, and the mother of future heirs. This was the final straw for Afonso IV and his counselors. King's advisors, among them Pedro Coelho, Álvaro Goncalves, and Diogo Lopes Pacheco, convinced the aging monarch that Inês de Castro posed an insurmountable threat to the kingdom's future. They argued that her children would dilute the royal bloodline and provoke a Castilian invasion. On a grim day in 1355, while Pedro was away on a hunting trip, King Afonso IV, accompanied by his 3 trusted advisors, journeyed to the monastery of Santa Clara a Velha in Coimbra, where Inês resided with her children. Despite Inês's pleas, despite her children clinging to her skirts, she was cruelly put to death. Accounts vary on the exact method, but many suggest she was beheaded right there in the presence of her terrified offspring by the very men who had convinced the king of her threat. Crónica Geral de Espanha de 1344 gives some of the most vivid if chilling details of the event. The news reached Pedro, and his grief swiftly turned to an unholy rage. He gathered his forces and launched a brutal rebellion against his own father, plunging the kingdom into civil war. Cities were besieged, lands were ravaged, and countless lives were lost in his vengeful fury. The civil conflict lasted for 2 agonizing years until a fragile peace was negotiated between father and son. However, the memory of Inés's murder festered in Pedro's heart. When King Afonso IV died in 1357, Pedro ascended to the throne as King Pedro I, a monarch forever marked by tragedy. His first act of vengeance was swift and terrible. He relentlessly hunted down the 3 advisors who had orchestrated Inés's death. Pedro Coelho and Álvaro Goncalves were captured, and their executions were carried out with a level of barbaric cruelty that shocked even a hardened medieval populace. Their hearts were ripped from their chests, one from the front, one from the back, a macabre mirroring of the pain Pedro felt for Inés. Diogo Lopes Pacheco managed to escape living in exile for many years, but Pedro's ultimate act of devotion or madness was yet to come. According to the legend, immortalized in works like Camões's Os Lusíadas, Pedro, in a grotesque and defiant ceremony in 1361, had Inés's corpse exhumed. Her decayed body was dressed in royal robes, a crown placed upon her skull, and then seated on the throne beside him. All the nobles of the court were forced to line up and kiss her withered hand, pledging their fealty to their deceased queen. This grim coronation was a chilling demonstration of Pedro's absolute power and his unwavering posthumous loyalty to the woman he loved. Her remains were then laid to rest in a magnificent sarcophagus in the monastery of Alcobaça, facing Pedro's own, so that on the day of judgment, their first sight would be of each other. The haunting melody inspired by this tale, often referred to as the Lament of the Unseen Crown, evokes the cold stone of the monastery, the whisper of ancient vows, and the chilling silence of a dead queen's coronation. It is a slow, deeply melancholic piece, perhaps, for a lone hurdy-gurdy, its droning accompaniment, creating a sense of inexorable fate. Over this drone, a rebec, a medieval stringed instrument, weaves a mournful, almost human wail. The melody starts with a simple, almost childlike theme suggesting the innocent love that first blossomed. As it progresses, dissonant harmonies emerge, hinting at the political machinations and the growing tension. A sudden, sharp, percussive strike might mark the moment of Inés's death, followed by a long, drawn-out silence, a breath held in shock. Then the hurdy-gurdy returns, even more profound, almost dirge-like, and the rebec's melody becomes more fragmented, mirroring Pedro's shattered mind and the horror of the post-mortem coronation. Piece ends on a sustained low note fading into an eerie silence, leaving a lingering chill like the touch of a withered hand. This melody is not merely sad. It carries the weight of obsessive grief, defiant love, and vengeful despair, all echoing through the hallowed halls of a royal crypt. Number 4. The Scholar's Silent Scream. In the vibrant intellectual landscape of 12th century Paris, a love story unfolded that defied the boundaries of wisdom, faith, and societal convention, leaving a trail of intellectual and emotional wreckage. This is the extraordinary and deeply tragic account of Peter Abélard and Héloïse, 2 of the most brilliant minds of their age. Peter Abélard was a philosopher, theologian, and logician of unparalleled renown. His lectures at Notre Dame drew thousands of students from across Europe, captivated by his sharp intellect and his audacious, often controversial methods of questioning established dogma. He was a rock star of medieval academia, mythic and utterly self-assured, as chronicled by himself in his autobiography, Historia Calamitatum. Héloïse was a young woman of equally extraordinary intellect. She resided with her uncle, Canon Fulbert, a prominent figure in the Parisian church. Héloïse was remarkable for her time, She was fluent in Latin, Greek, and Hebrew, exceptionally well-read in both classical and theological texts, and possessed a mind that could rival Abélard's own. Her letters, later collected and published, reveal a profound depth of thought and emotion. Fulbert, recognizing his niece's brilliance, sought out the greatest scholar of the age, Abélard, to tutor her, and so the stage was set for a fateful encounter. Abélard, in his Historia Calamitatum, openly admitted to being consumed by lust for Héloïse, a desire that quickly blossomed into a passionate secret affair. Their intellectual sparring gave way to clandestine meetings, whispered vows, and an illicit love that burned brightly against the backdrop of scholastic pursuit. Abélard, the celebrated master, found himself utterly undone by his brilliant student. Their love was not just physical. It was a meeting of minds, a profound intellectual and emotional connection that transcended the power dynamic of teacher and pupil. Héloïse became pregnant. This was a scandalous development that threatened to ruin Abélard's burgeoning career and bring deep dishonor upon Fulbert's family. To mitigate the scandal, Héloïse was sent away to Brittany, where she gave birth to a son whom she named Astrolabe. In a desperate attempt to legitimize their relationship and protect Abélard's reputation, they secretly married. This was an act of profound defiance against the societal norms of the time, where clerical celibacy was increasingly enforced and secret marriages were fraught with peril. However, the secret did not hold. Fulbert, enraged by the deception and the perceived dishonor, sought vengeance. His fury culminated in a horrifying act of retribution. One night, Abélard was ambushed by Fulbert's hired thugs. This horrific event not only inflicted immense physical pain, but also shattered his identity as a man and, perhaps more importantly, in the context of medieval society, his capacity for a normal life and advancement within the church hierarchy. Trauma of the attack sent Abélard into a spiral of despair and shame. Héloïse, devastated by what had happened to her beloved, and at Abélard's insistence, took vows as a nun at the convent of Argenteuil. Abélard himself, in his profound humiliation and spiritual crisis, entered the monastery of Saint-Denis, becoming a monk. Their physical separation, however, did not sever their intellectual and emotional bond. Their relationship transformed into a lifelong correspondence, a series of deeply personal and profoundly moving letters that reveal the complexity of their enduring love, their intellectual prowess, and their spiritual struggles. Abélard, from the confines of his monastic life, continued his philosophical and theological work, often facing persecution for his unconventional views. Héloïse, as abbess of the Paraclete, a monastery Abélard himself had founded, became a respected spiritual leader and scholar in her own right. Maintained her sharp intellect and deep affection for Abélard. The letters chronicle their journey through faith, regret, and a unique form of enduring love, exploring themes of sin, redemption, and the nature of their forced separation. They stand as some of the most powerful and intimate writings from the Middle Ages. Their love was a constant source of agony, a bond that transcended physical presence, but was forever marked by the violence that had severed their worldly connection. Abélard died in 1142, and Héloïse lived for another 22 years, dedicating herself to scholarship and spiritual leadership. Upon her death in 1164, her body was, according to tradition, placed in the tomb beside Abélard's. Their remains were moved several times over the centuries, eventually finding their final resting place together at Père Lachaise Cemetery in Paris, a testament to their enduring, albeit tragic, union. The haunting melody inspired by this story, often called the scholar's silent scream, is a polyphonic composition, complex and layered, perhaps intended for a small consort of voices. And the lute, it opens with a sophisticated, almost mathematical counterpoint, reflecting Abélard's brilliant mind and the intellectual debates that defined his world. The lute's precise, intricate plucking might represent the careful, reasoned arguments of a philosopher. As the melody progresses, a solo voice, perhaps a high tenor or a soprano, enters with a soaring, passionate line representing Héloïse's untamed spirit and her profound affection. These two musical themes, intellectual and emotional, intertwine beautifully, sometimes in harmony, sometimes in slight dissonance, mirroring their clandestine love. A sudden, jarring shift in the music occurs, perhaps a brutal, unexpected chord or percussive crash, representing the moment of Abélard's mutilation. The melody then descends into a deep, guttural lament. Polyphony becomes fractured, voices overlapping in a discordant way, expressing the chaos and despair of forced monasticism. The lute's melody, once precise, now sounds hesitant and broken, reflecting Abélard's physical and mental anguish. The solo voice, Héloïse's voice, returns, but now it is laced with profound sadness, yet still retaining a defiant strength, reflecting her continued intellectual and spiritual life. To cite her heartbreak, piece ends with a lingering, unresolved harmony, a quiet tension that never fully dissipates, leaving the listener with a sense of the lover's eternal, intellectual anguish, a love that continued to resonate. Number 3. The Whirlwind's Echo. In the turbulent political landscape of 13th century Italy, where city-states clashed and noble families vied for power, a love story unfolded that became immortalized, not in courtly romance, but in the harrowing depths of an epic poem. This is the tragic tale of Paolo Malatesta and Francesca de Rimini, figures whose passion led them to an eternal wind-swept torment. Their story gained widespread fame through Dante Alighieri's Inferno, written in the early 14th century, where he encounters them in the second circle of hell, reserved for the lustful. Francesca de Rimini was a noblewoman from Ravenna, born into the powerful da Polenta family. In the complex web of medieval alliances, her marriage was a political pawn. To secure peace and alliance between Ravenna and Rimini, Francesca was betrothed to Gianciotto Malatesta, the Lord of Rimini, and a formidable warrior. Gianciotto was known for his physical deformity. He was lame, but also for his fierce, often brutal nature. The marriage was arranged as was common for noblewomen of the era, without regard for personal affection. Francesca was likely a young woman, perhaps barely a teenager, when she entered this life-altering agreement. Cronica della Città di Rimini might contain some early references to the Malatesta family's history. Upon her arrival in Rimini, according to later interpretations and popular retellings, Francesca met Gianciotto's younger brother, Paolo Malatesta. Paolo was everything. Gianciotto was not. Handsome, modak, and cultured. He was known as Il Bello, the Beautiful. There are some suggestions that Francesca was tricked into marrying Gianciotto by being introduced to Paolo, first leading her to believe he was her intended husband. Regardless of the deception, a powerful forbidden attraction sparked between Paolo and Francesca. Their love grew in secret. A dangerous flame in the Malatesta stronghold, they found solace in each other's company, sharing books and quiet moments away from the watchful eyes of the court. The turning point, as recounted by Francesca herself to Dante in Canto the 5th of the Inferno, came during a reading of the French Arthurian romance, the story of Lancelot and Guinevere. As they read of Lancelot's first kiss with Guinevere, their own hidden desires overwhelmed them. Paolo, trembling, kissed Francesca. This single kiss sealed their fate. It was a moment of profound, passionate surrender, an act that shattered the societal and marital boundaries of their time. The Roman de Lancelot en prose, a popular text in the 13th century, would have been the very book that ignited their tragic passion. Their illicit affair continued, shrouded in secrecy, until it was inevitably discovered by Gianciotto. The exact circumstances of the discovery vary in retelling, but the most common version involves Gianciotto finding them together, perhaps in a moment of unguarded intimacy. Consumed by fury, betrayal, and wounded pride, Gianciotto attacked them. In a fit of jealous rage, he murdered both his brother Paolo and his wife Francesca, on the spot. The precise date of their deaths is often cited as 1285. This brutal act of double homicide shocked even a society accustomed to violence and vendetta. The aftermath of their deaths is less chronicled historically, but more famously depicted in Dante's Inferno. Dante, a contemporary of their tragedy and a keen observer of political and social affairs, places them in the second circle of hell, where souls are eternally swept about by a violent, unrelenting whirlwind, punished for their carnal sins. It is here that Francesca recounts their story to Dante, her words filled with a poignant mix of regret, enduring love, and sorrow for their shared fate. Her famous lines, "We read no more that day," encapsulate the moment their passion consumed them, leading directly to their violent end. Their story became a quintessential example of illicit love, leading to tragic consequences, inspiring countless artists, writers, and composers through the centuries. It speaks to the uncontrollable power of desire, the harsh realities of arranged marriages, and the unforgiving nature of medieval justice and morality. The Decameron by Boccaccio also features a version of their story, further cementing its place in popular culture. The haunting melody inspired by this tale, often called the whirlwind's echo, is a swirling, agitated piece reflecting the relentless storm that traps the lovers in Dante's hell. It is likely played by a combination of rebecks, a medieval fiddle known for its piercing sound, and hand drums or tambourines. Piece opens with a deceptively sweet, almost lyrical melody, perhaps carried by a single rebec, suggesting the initial innocent beauty of Paolo and Francesca's shared moments, and the charm of their forbidden love. This delicate theme is soon joined by another, creating a gentle counterpoint symbolizing their growing connection. As the melody progresses, the tempo gradually quickens and the instrumentation becomes more agitated. The rebecks begin to play faster, more intricate lines, building in intensity. The drums enter, at first subtly, then with increasing force, creating a rhythmic pulse that feels both alluring and foreboding, mimicking the quickening heartbeat of forbidden passion. A sudden, sharp, almost dissonant chord might erupt, perhaps using the rebecks playing harsh double stops, marking the moment of Gian Ciotto's discovery and his violent rage. Following this, the music transforms entirely. The melody becomes chaotic, fragmented, and relentlessly driving, reflecting the eternal whirlwind of the lustful. The rebecks play frantic, swirling arpeggios, and the drums pound with an unceasing, almost suffocating rhythm. There is no resolution in the music, only a continuous agitated motion that mirrors the lovers' endless torment. Piece ends not with a final chord, but with a sudden abrupt cut-off, leaving a lingering uneasy silence, as if the whirlwind has momentarily passed only to return with relentless fury. This melody captures the intoxicating pull of illicit desire and the brutal, unforgiving consequences that follow. Number 2. The Green Knight's Betrayal. Within the shimmering, idealized world of King Arthur's Camelot, a love story unfolded that, far from celebrating chivalry, plunged the entire kingdom into an abyss of betrayal, civil war, and ultimate ruin. This is the epic, heartbreaking tale of Sir Lancelot and Queen Guinevere, a narrative woven into the very fabric of Arthurian legend, reaching its zenith in works like Sir Thomas Malory's Le Morte d'Arthur, compiled in the 15th century from earlier French and English sources. King Arthur, the epitome of noble kingship, established the Round Table, a brotherhood of knights dedicated to justice, honor, and the pursuit of truth. Among these knights, none was more celebrated than Sir Lancelot du Lac. He was valiant, peerless in combat, and possessed of a charisma that drew all eyes. He was Arthur's most trusted friend and champion, the very embodiment of chivalric ideals. Queen Guinevere, Arthur's consort, was renowned for her beauty and grace, a fitting queen for such a magnificent king. The Lancelot Grail cycle, a vast collection of old French prose romances from the 13th century, delves deeply into the intricacies of their relationships. However, beneath the veneer of Camelot's perfection, a dangerous and ultimately destructive love affair began to blossom between Lancelot and Guinevere. It was a love born of proximity, shared confidences, and perhaps a certain emotional distance from Arthur, who was often consumed by affairs of state or quests. Their affair was kept secret for many years, a perilous game played within the very heart of the royal court. Their passion was intense, but it was also a constant source of internal torment for Lancelot, who struggled with his loyalty to Arthur and his devotion to Guinevere. Guinevere, too, was caught between her duty as queen and her overwhelming love for the greatest knight. The secrecy inevitably bred suspicion and resentment among other knights, particularly those who envied Lancelot's favored position or harbored ill will towards the queen. Sir Agravain and Sir Mordred, Arthur's illegitimate son and nephew, were among those who sought to expose the affair, driven by malice and a desire to see Lancelot disgraced and Arthur's kingdom disabilized. Their accusations were initially dismissed, but the whispers grew louder, fueled by occasional indiscretions and the sheer weight of Lancelot's and Guinevere's undeniable closeness. The alliterative Morte Arthur, an English poem from the late 14th century, vividly portrays the escalating tensions. The truth finally burst forth in a brutal confrontation. Lancelot, caught in Guinevere's chambers, was forced to fight his way out, killing several of the accusing knights, including Agravain. This act, while an escape, confirmed the affair beyond doubt. Arthur, heartbroken and publicly shamed, was left with no choice but to condemn his queen for treason and adultery, a crime punishable by burning at the stake. This was a king's duty, even if it meant destroying the woman he loved. Lancelot, true to his chivalric vow to protect Guinevere, rode to her rescue, snatching her from the pyre. In the ensuing battle, he inadvertently killed two of Arthur's most loyal knights, Sir Gareth and Sir Gaheris, brothers of Sir Gawain, who had been unarmed. This collateral damage further inflamed the court and deeply embittered Gawain, who had previously been Lancelot's staunch friend. This single act of rescue, though noble in intent, fractured the Round Table irrevocably. The kingdom was plunged into civil war. Arthur, torn between his love for Guinevere and Lancelot, and his duty to uphold justice and avenge his fallen knights, besieged Lancelot's castle in France. The once united brotherhood of knights turned against itself, fighting on opposing sides. While Arthur was embroiled in this devastating conflict abroad, Mordred seized the opportunity to usurp the throne in Britain, proclaiming himself king and attempting to marry Guinevere. The Vulgate cycle elaborates on Mordred's treachery and the chaotic fallout. Arthur was forced to abandon his siege against Lancelot and rush back to Britain to confront Mordred. The final devastating Battle of Camlan ensued, a bloody and catastrophic confrontation that saw the death of Arthur himself, Mordred, and the vast majority of the Knights of the Round Table. Camelot, once a beacon of hope and order, lay shattered, its ideals drowned in a sea of fraternal blood. Guinevere, in profound remorse and sorrow, retreated to a convent, choosing a life of religious penance. Lancelot, shattered by the ruin he had indirectly caused, wandered as a hermit, consumed by grief and guilt. He eventually found his way to Guinevere's convent, hoping for one last glimpse, one last word. But Guinevere refused him, telling him their love had destroyed their world, and they must now seek penance. Lancelot returned to his hermitage, dying shortly after, his heart broken. Their love, born of passion and secrecy, ultimately led to the downfall of a legendary kingdom, a testament to how even the noblest of intentions can have ruinous consequences when they stray from the path of honor. The Winchester manuscript of Malory's text often highlights the stark tragedy of their final separation. The haunting melody inspired by this epic tragedy, often referred to as the Green Knight's Betrayal, is a grand orchestral piece reflecting the vast scale of Arthurian legend and the catastrophic fall of a kingdom. It would be performed by a full consort of viols, trumpets, shawms, a medieval woodwind instrument, and drums, creating a rich tapestry of sound. The melody opens with a regal fanfare, bright and hopeful, evoking the initial glory and promise of Camelot, perhaps with bold brass and a steady drum beat. This is followed by a lyrical, sweeping melody, carried by the viols, which captures the idealized beauty of Queen Guinevere and the heroic stature of Sir Lancelot. There are moments of quiet yearning with a solo viol playing a tender, almost secret theme, hinting at their forbidden love. As the piece progresses, a sense of underlying tension begins to creep in. Tempo might subtly quicken, and the shawms introduce a slightly dissonant, almost mocking counter-melody representing the whispers and suspicions of the court. A series of sharp percussive strikes like a clash of swords interrupts the more romantic themes, signaling the exposure of the affair and the ensuing violence. The music then becomes increasingly mournful and desolate. The grand fanfares are replaced by a slow, drawn-out lament, carried by the lower viols, expressing Arthur's heartbreak and the despair of the kingdom. The drums once used for martial glory now beat a solemn funereal rhythm. Elements of the earlier hopeful melody might reappear, but they are twisted, fragmented, and imbued with profound sadness, representing the ruined ideals of Camelot. The piece concludes with a lingering, hollow echo of a single trumpet fanfare slowly fading into absolute silence, leaving the listener with the heavy weight of a kingdom lost to love and betrayal. Number 1. The Potion's Curse. Deep within the misty ancient lands of Cornwall and Ireland, a tale of love so powerful it transcended death and destiny, unfolded, becoming one of the most enduring and tragic narratives of the medieval era. This is the story of Tristan and Isolde, a saga immortalized in various medieval versions, including the Anglo-Norman poem by Thomas of Britain from the 12th century and the German version by Gottfried von Strassburg from the early 13th century. Tristan, a valiant knight of Cornwall, was nephew and loyal vassal to King Mark. He was renowned for his courage, his skill as a warrior, and his musical prowess, particularly with the harp. His early life was marked by hardship and exile, which only forged his character into a figure of legend. Mark, seeking a queen, dispatched Tristan to Ireland to bring back Isolde the Fair, the daughter of the Irish king. Anguish. Isolde was celebrated for her unparalleled beauty and her healing abilities. The journey from Ireland to Cornwall was to be a simple diplomatic mission, a voyage that would secure a political alliance through marriage. However, fate, or perhaps a mischievous maidservant, intervened. Isolde's mother had prepared a potent love potion intended for Isolde and King Mark to ensure their lasting affection and the stability of their union. This elixir was entrusted to Brangane, Isolde's loyal lady-in-waiting. During the voyage, a mix-up occurred. Whether by accident or a cruel twist of destiny, Tristan and Isolde, mistaking it for wine, drank the entire potion together. The Roman de Tristan en prose provides vivid descriptions of the scene. From that moment, an irresistible, all-consuming love bloomed between them. It was a love not born of choice or reasoned affection, but of an enchanted, inescapable force. Their passion was so intense, so absolute, that it defied all reason, all duty, and all consequences. They arrived in Cornwall, and Isolde married King Mark, becoming queen. But her heart and Tristan's were forever bound to each other by the potion's unbreakable magic. Their illicit affair began almost immediately, carried out with elaborate secrecy and cunning deceptions. Brangane, burdened by the knowledge of the potion, often aided them, sometimes even taking Isolde's place in Mark's bed to preserve the secret. Their love was a constant dance on the precipice of discovery, filled with thrilling encounters and agonizing separations. They were constantly on guard, devising ingenious ways to meet, risking everything for fleeting moments together. The famous trial by ordeal where Isolde swore an oath of innocence while holding Tristan's hand in disguise, is a testament to their desperate measures to avoid exposure. The Folie Tristan d'Oxford details some of these clever deceptions despite their efforts. Whispers and suspicions mounted. Courtiers, particularly the jealous dwarf Fracien, repeatedly tried to expose them to King Mark. Mark, though deeply loving towards both his nephew and his queen, was tormented by doubt. He often sought proof only to be swayed by their clever ploys, or by his own affection for them. The recurring theme is Mark's indecision and his inability to fully believe the accusations, despite mounting evidence. This constant pressure, the fear of discovery, and the moral conflict weighed heavily upon the lovers. Eventually, their secret became too difficult to maintain. When their affair was undeniably exposed, Mark's fury knew no bounds, condemned Isolde to be burned and Tristan to be hanged, but they managed to escape. They fled into the wild, desolate forest of Morrowa, living as outlaws, their love, their only solace in the harsh wilderness. This period of wild freedom, away from courtly constraints, is often depicted as a time of pure, unadulterated passion, though also of great suffering. Their time in the wilderness ended when Mark, hunting in the forest, discovered them. A sword placed between them to indicate their chaste slumber. Moved by their apparent innocence, or perhaps by his own enduring love, he spared them. Tristan, in an act of penance, left Cornwall and journeyed to Brittany. There he met and married another Isolde, Isolde of the White Hands, out of loneliness and a mistaken attempt to sever his ties to Isolde de Fair. However, his heart remained with his first love, and the marriage was never truly consummated. In Brittany, Tristan was wounded by a poisoned spear, a wound that festered and could only be healed by Isolde the Fair, for she alone possessed the knowledge and skill. He sent a messenger to Cornwall, instructing him to hoist a white sail if Isolde was coming, and a black sail if she was not. As the ship approached, Tristan, too weak to see, asked his wife, Isolde of the White Hands, about the color of the sail. In a moment of jealous despair, she lied, telling him the sail was black. Believing Isolde the Fair had abandoned him, Tristan turned to the wall and died of grief. Isolde the Fair, upon hearing of his death, arrived moments too late. She laid herself down beside his lifeless body and, embracing him, died of a broken heart. In some versions, a briar rose and a vine grow from their graves, intertwining, symbolizing their unbreakable bond, even in death. Their legend, often compared to the later Romeo and Juliet, became a powerful testament to the destructive yet utterly compelling nature of fated love. Thomas of Britton's poem explicitly portrays the overwhelming fated nature of their love. The haunting melody inspired by this ultimate love tragedy, simply called The Potion's Curse, is a deeply passionate and almost obsessive piece, performed perhaps by a solo female voice, like a soprano, accompanied by a harp and a medieval viol, a bowed string instrument. It opens with a gentle, almost ethereal harp arpeggio, suggesting the quiet beauty of the setting and the initial innocence of the journey. The viol enters with a melancholic yearning melody, slow and drawn out, immediately conveying a sense of fated longing. The soprano voice then soars with a haunting repeating motif, full of an irresistible pull, symbolizing the potion's magical effect and the lovers' immediate, undeniable connection. As the melody develops, it becomes more intense, building in dynamics and complexity, reflecting the clandestine nature of their affair and the escalating risks they take. There are moments of exquisite beauty, where the voice and viol intertwine in perfect harmony, conveying the profound joy of their forbidden love. But beneath this beauty, a constant undertone of sorrow and impending doom persists. The harp's plucking might become more insistent, almost like a racing heartbeat reflecting their constant fear of discovery. A particularly poignant section might feature a dissonant, sustained note from the viol, representing the bitter twist of fate with the second Isolde's lie. The vocal line becomes increasingly fragile and heartbroken. The piece culminates in a fading, sorrowful descent, as the voice and instruments slowly diminish in volume and pitch, representing their deaths. The final notes, our soft, almost imperceptible whisper from the harp echoing the intertwining briar and vine, leaving an enduring sense of a love that defied life and death, but was ultimately cursed by its own inescapable power.